Hello everybody, today I will be going over user-defined classes. This will include instance variables, constructors, accessors, mutators, and any other methods as needed. But let's get right into it, shall we? The class name should be singular as well as a noun. To decide a class name, ask yourself who should own all of the data, or at least who should know the data. So let's start by defining a class. Here we have a class called public class minigame challenge. It is public because we need this class to be known by all other classes, so it can be used by other classes. Also, the standard is to start with an uppercase letter as well as the first letter of any following words in the class name. In addition, the class must be saved in a file called whatever the class name is .java. So for this program, for example, the file must be saved as minigamechallenge.java. This is case sensitive, by the way. Alright, moving on, we need to define the fields. We want to add fields that each minigame challenge object will have. The objects are going to be the players of the game, so each player should have a name, an age, and a score, at least for this program anyways. So let us now declare the fields by specifying the visibility, the type, and our chosen variable name of the field. So for this program we will use private as the visibility so that the object can control its own data. We next need to decide the type for each of these. So for our fields, the name will be a string, while the age and the score will be an integer. Finally, a variable name is needed to store the data, so for our names we need to make sure to use names that make sense for what the field represents. So for example, we want to store a string containing the user's name, so it makes sense to call the variable name username. Alright, moving on to constructors. We use constructors to initialize values of the fields. To create a constructor, we need to enter the visibility type, followed by the class name and a parameter list. So for our example, we have one constructor that has no parameters and one constructor that has 3 parameters. For our first constructor, we are initializing the values of the fields to the following data. The name will be CPU1, the age will be 150, and the score will be 9001. For our other constructor, it will take all of those 3 types of variables, and notice how it looks like the same format of a method. The difference though is that it doesn't have a return type. It simply has the visibility type, which is public, and the name is the exact same name as the class. Alright, now finally we get to the part where we can access the data. First up we have accessors, or getters. The way we let objects of other classes access the data in private fields is by creating public methods that access the private fields. Accessors are methods that return the private information. We declare them by the visibility, the type, and the getFieldName, followed by open and close parentheses, of course. So for our example, our first accessor is public string getUsername. This method will return the value of the variable username. Next, we will create modifiers or setters. We declare these as visibility, return type, and setFieldName. So for example, in this setter method we declare the visibility to be public, the return type to be boolean, and the setFieldName to be setUsername. And finally, inside the parameters we will use string the username. Later on, this is because later on in the code below this method, we are essentially storing the input from the parameter into the variable username. With that in mind, let's go over to a test class that is used to check if everything works correctly. Basically, this class will check 4 different ways of checking for correct functionality using the minigame challenge class. For example, here we are going to test to see if the noParameter constructor returns us data stored in its block of code. This is going to be the default values given over here in the constructor. And at player 4, for example, we're testing the 3-parameter constructor with the following data of human being the username, 25 being the age, and 50 being the score. Now when we run this, that is the data that we should see in the statements of system.out.println to string. Our string is basically going to print out the name, age, and score of the information stored. Alright, let's go ahead and run this. Let's give it some space though. Okay, look for example at player 4. The information with the 3-parameter constructor has the correct data of human 25 years old and a score of 50.